Welcome to the Lively Art of Conversation. It's a weekly show we call Moral Side of the News, and we're glad you're with us this weekend. I'm John Blim with the WHAS Crusade for Children. With me, as always, is a distinguished panel: Rabbi Emerita Gaylia Rooks, the Temple; Reverend Jason Crosby, Center College; Reverend Dr. Kilen Gray, Louisville Presbyterian Theological Seminary; and Father Bill Hammer, St. Margaret Mary and St. William Catholic Churches. Welcome to you, panel. We begin today with domestic terrorism. The final trial is underway in the case of 14 men who allegedly plotted to kidnap Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer in 2020. The state's attorney general says domestic extremism is our biggest existential threat. Panel, the governor's office said, quote, "Without accountability, extremists will be emboldened." So do you agree? And is that also at the heart of the FBI arresting those who participated in the January 6th riots at our U.S. Capitol?
I mean, obviously, if you lead an insurrection, if you storm the Capitol, if you plot to kidnap a duly elected governor, you need to be arrested. I mean, that's the rule of law. That's something that I think everyone should be able to agree on, that that's the very foundation of our democracy, you know, that we have elected officials. Gretchen Whitmer's election was not a close call. She's been an extremely, extremely popular governor. She's done so much for the state of Michigan. It is unbelievable. There's so many things we could point out, but I'm especially impressed with her bipartisan work. I mean, she's really worked to cross, partisan lines and do what's best for the state of Michigan. And boy, when it comes to cleaning up the water and Flint and that whole mess, she's helped the auto industry enormously. That's so important to the economy in Michigan. Education. I'll let someone else talk while I think of more. I mean, she over, I don't know, millions of people, I think, got put onto healthcare who had been previously completely uninsured. She came into a huge deficit, not only brought down the deficit, but now runs a surplus government, and all this without raising taxes. I mean, I think she's heroic.
I think that it's very important that voices are spoken out against domestic terrorism. I think that it is. I agree that it's the number one concern of national security, not foreign terrorism, domestic terrorism. And we have to be very honest that this has a deep white supremacist base and ground from which this grows out of. This is not anything strange to America. This is part of our American history that others in our country wants to completely stop teaching in schools and expressing the truth about. Whether and not, Gaylia, I agree with you. Gretchen Whitmer has been an astounding leader for the state of Michigan. But if she was to actually accomplish nothing in that office, it does not warrant anyone wanting to try to kidnap her as an elected official and to do any type of harm to any elected official. The second thing that I would say, and I would pass it on, is that it is astounding to me that we don't have other legislators across the country, regardless of party, are speaking out against this as if this could not happen to them. This is just an example of how partial and how bifurcated and separated we are politically as a country, that you have persons who these agents who are now being tried may have supported a particular ideology within a particular political party, which none of those members have spoken at all about this threat to democracy or the threat to the safety of elected officials. It is a sad day in America when we don't have elected officials who are not speaking. There should be a cry. There should not be any scant research that we need to do to find other legislators across the country, both state and federal, who are decrying this development, but we don't have enough people speaking out. And this, to me, is what's emboldening these persons who are doing domestic terrorism, because there's not enough voices of people of position and power who are speaking out against it.
Yeah, I do think occasionally you hear the counter argument, well, it's just freedom of speech. Well, that's not what this is about at all. That we certainly at times have maybe said, oh, go jump off a cliff, or in response back and retort to somebody you disagree with. And we have a long history of people speaking out against government leaders, government policy, and protesting. But it's one thing to do it verbally. Another thing to then start putting things into place to overthrow. And that's the difference in this significant way in all these things, whether it's, again, invading the U.S. Capitol or invading a state's capital. And I'm using the word deliberately, invading and seeking to overthrow. People will sit around and say, well, we have a history of overthrowing the government. That's how we got founded, overthrowing the British government. But again, that was an entirely different type of process that went through. And there was attempts to verbally do that and to, voice our oppression, our opposition, to what we perceive as oppression. But these situations we're talking about right now are categorically very different than just simply saying, I don't like this governor's policy, or I don't like this president's policy. This is a desire to remove democracy and put in place what I want, not what the majority of the people have selected or chosen. And that is something that has to be opposed across the board.
If I can just jump in, Jason, sorry. When you say, now I lost my train of thought because I felt so guilty jumping in on Jason. Go ahead.
Well, Gaylia, I tell you what, if lightning strikes and it comes to you, jump back in. I am grateful that we are friends, and I take no offense. I have two quick points to add to the good ones that have already been made. One, first of all, we're talking about this generally framing it in terms of domestic terrorism. But while this is seemingly homegrown, I see that there are tentacles and points of connection and intersection to a movement that's happening globally to undermine democratic systems of government, be it here in the United States, Europe, other parts of the world. And so, yes, this is a unique situation to the United States. As Kilen mentioned, this is nothing new. In the state of Michigan, you had actors like Henry Ford at one point in time that threatened to perhaps side with the likes of Adolf Hitler and enter the political arena. So it's not new in the state of Michigan to have this kind of hyper rhetoric that is very, very dangerous. But yeah, ultimately, I see this taking place more broadly, globally as well. And so it's a threat that I think we have to address domestically, but we also have to recognize the points of interconnection with others that are dealing with it around the world. A second piece that's connected to the religious realm is that those of us that have operated, be it in Jewish, Christian circles, Muslim circles, we have all seen the ways in which religious fundamentalism has tainted and tarnished and proven to be bodily harmful to individuals in religious circles. And I think that what I am witnessing that has occurred recently in more secular arenas in political discourse is something that I've witnessed as a Baptist my entire 4.5 decades on this earth. And that is the way in which when people adhere to strict fundamentalist doctrine and beliefs, invariably invariably every single time, someone will not get hurt, not just in the sense that their feelings will get hurt or that they might be ostracized from a particular group. There is physical harm that emanates from theological fundamentalist constructs. And so recognizing the parallel within the religious sphere to what's happening in this political discourse, I think is important for us to note as well.
Right, because fanaticism is dangerous. Whether it's religious fanatics, extremism, or political. Governor Whitmer herself called out our ex-president in saying that she puts a lot of the blame at his feet because he encourages, he models, he fosters this kind of not just intolerance and disrespect, but this kind of cowboy, I guess that's an insult to the Cowboys, this kind of lawlessness, this if you don't like the way things are going, that's what I was going to say before. I wonder if one of the reasons that she was targeted is because she is so successful at reaching across the aisle, and Republicans who, for various reasons, don't want her, don't like her, don't approve of her, that fanatical fringe that has become so, as someone said, emboldened. I think, Kilen, you were the one who said that, emboldened and just lawless. They it's just like storming the Capitol. It's inciting an insurrection. It's breaking the law and threatening lives. And I mean, we are very fortunate that January 6th did not get even worse than it was. And as more and more evidence comes out about the great lie, that the election was stolen, the great lie is that apparently all the players knew that. And there's physical evidence and emails and texts and things and phone calls recorded that show that they were very much aware of that. So, we're recording this on Thursday, which is the day that theoretically the past president will be presenting himself to the court to find out, what's going to happen with election interference and things like that. And I think that absolutely is the greatest threat, internal domestic terrorism. Who would have imagined that we would be calling it that? But that's what it's become.
We really need to think about how widespread this is becoming too. These are the most famous cases. What I mean is the January 6th and Governor Whitmer's encounter. But there are just everyday workers. I think about the poll workers that's down in Georgia. I think about other political persons who are just doing their jobs. The persons down in Georgia who were just basically executing an election that was fair and that had their lives and their homes threatened. People who have had to leave their homes out of safety because you've had numerous threats. I think one of the election poll workers down in Georgia testified to 330 phone calls, 330 threats that she received a result of these terrorists who terrorized her life. And she and her daughter had to leave their homes, and their whole lives have been completely changed. This is how far this goes. And we only know about the ones that our news agencies report about, but there's all kinds of manifestations of terror that's happening with people who are just doing their jobs. everyday jobs that
their jobs to stand up for democracy.
To stand up for democracy, and then their lives are being threatened. And so this is definitely a significant threat to democracy. It's a threat to peace everywhere. It's a threat to not just liberals or moderates. It's a threat to every person who wishes to express their voice and their sentiments politically or religiously. We even see these types of things happening in religious spaces where people are just completely, there's polarities within spaces where there should be fidelity and trust and unity. And so this is a serious problem that we cannot take lightly.
The poll workers, but also there's been documented now threats against jurors, people's on these. Yeah. So it's not just, it's getting more and more widespread that if you stand up for justice and right. And so as this is a moral side of the news, we need to name that as evil. That is evil. And,
yeah.
Well, that is part of what is going on right now is the forces of evil and trying to overcome what are the foundation blocks for democracy. Yes, Jason, yeah.
Well, sorry, Bill. It's contagious, apparently, today. Stepping on each other a little bit. Sorry about that. I would just quickly add that part of what is important as a deterrent in this moment are these judicial proceedings. And part of the reason that these indictments that have been levied against President Trump and others, part of the reason these trials regarding the attempted kidnapping of Governor Whitmer have taken a while is because it is very important that those investigations take time and are thoughtful and are thorough. And it's important, and then once an indictment's handed down, one thing that we have all been reminded as former President Trump has been indicted is that he is innocent until proven guilty. And that's an important component of our judicial process. But that process does take time for it to play itself out. And it's not perfect. I am not saying that. But it is an important component of our system of governance that plays a significant role in moments like this to hold people accountable. January 6th, perpetrators as well. And then finally, one thing I'd add is that legal system, the judicial branch, it rests on more than just laws on the books, statutes or precedents. It rests upon people and groups of people that share certain values. That's the only way that it works, is that we as a society say that if you are a juror, we appreciate your service. You are in a unique position, and we will not threaten you, whatever the outcome may be, because you are serving the public in that way. That's just one basic cornerstone belief that supersedes legal documentation, that gets to the moral and ethical core that undergirds the conversation we're having about these trials with Governor Whitmer and others.
I couldn't agree more. And I think that not only the jurors, but I think the FBI deserves a lot of credit for their fulfilling their obligations. And looking to the moral side of that, I read an article last week. It was very upsetting. And just the one point that I want to get to is that more people believe what Donald Trump says than what their own clergy person says. Did anyone else see that article? You did. That's how pervasive this cult of personality has become. And in my opinion, how dangerous. And I'm not talking about any one clergy person or any one religion or sect or belief, but I think John Blim, I think you were the one who used the expression an existential threat. And it absolutely is an existential threat to this great experiment called America, that a lot of people are saying the writing is on the wall, it's failing, it didn't work.
Well, you're watching and listening to Moral Side of the News, and we're off to a good start on this episode. We have a second topic on this program today. An excessive heat wave sweeps our country, and a devastating wildfire destroys parts of Maui where still up to 1,000 people are unaccounted for. Analysts, these disasters seem to affect the most vulnerable, the poor and the homeless, for example. How do you see these events?
Well, my heart goes out to the persons who have perished in Maui. It's just indescribable what the scenes that have been revealed and have been shown of the devastation. It's just hard to wrap my brain around. It's just hard to even fathom. And the death toll continues to rise as they find victims. I think that it's heartbreaking, it's devastating, and all that we can in the world to do to support those families, we should do. Heat wave is just as damaging for those who are houseless within our communities and across the country. The elderly is especially threatened. We were talking earlier before we came on the air about those homes, and particularly those that are being that include elderly persons whom the HVAC fails during these types of extreme heat. And so we're grateful for all that cities are doing to try to make a difference with cooling centers, which they're going to be overwhelmed probably with as these days continue. Gratefully, we're seeing that the meteorologists are saying that this weekend should be a break, particularly Sunday would be a break, but great concern, not only of those who are elderly, but those who have to work outside, utility workers, our first responders. It's just a big, huge concern and deal. Hopefully people are hydrating, checking on our elderly citizens, our kids, those who are vulnerable, those who have health issues. But it's one of those examples where in places like this, from Maui to all of our cities that are covered by this heat, we get through together. This is where we understand that we are not just islands to ourselves, that we live and have some satiety of life of some kind when we understand that we are morally tied together as human beings. And hopefully we can do that and ride through this wave.
One of the things that comes to my mind is the pastoral care for all these families. And we have been through some of these experiences, if we think back far enough. In many ways, these families are going through the process that happened during the war, missing in action. Somebody is deceased, but you have no body and no way to kind of focus that process, which is part of the natural grieving process. And so I think, again, a lot of people have empathy, but to also be unable to literally be on the ground with them. But those who are, to consider that perspective as well. These families are grieving so deeply. They don't know 100% sure the person is now dead, but you're 99% sure. And they have to go through that experience.
I can't imagine that. The holding on to that thread of hope as day after day goes by, it is just, my heart breaks for those people, for the families of people who know that their loved ones died. It's devastating, the whole thing. And in Maui and also here in Louisville, part of the problem with the heat is also the air quality. So because of the wildfires, the air quality in Maui, which is usually significantly better, is very bad. But here in Louisville, the heat, the humidity, and the air quality, it's like the trifecta of difficulty. And no one's using the term climate change, climate devastation, whatever, but I would like to bring that up. What we do to the planet, we do to everyone, as was said. We're all interconnected. We're all tied together. It's like the story of the man there's three people in a rowboat, and one man pulls out a drill and starts drilling under his seat, and everybody says, "What are you doing? What are you doing?" And he says, "It's okay. It's just under my seat. We are all in this together. This is our fragile planet Earth that climate deniers." To me, that's like election deniers. It's like the people who denied that smoking cigarettes was bad for you, even though we knew that it was. Okay, I'm going to stop before I get on a new soapbox.
Well, one dimension of this that we haven't mentioned that is very relevant and germane on this day when we're recording this is that currently the city of Louisville continues to clear homeless camps during this excessive heat wave. And it has been policy and customary that during white flag days, be it due to excessive cold or excessive heat, that those clearings stop because of the compounded effect of the extreme weather conditions have on those who are vulnerable, where we began, at least in part, this conversation. So it is my fervent hope and wish that the mayor or others in positions of authority in our city will pledge henceforth during a white flag day, be it due to cold or heat, to not clear out homelessness encampments.
I think, when we look at it from a moral perspective, we're guardians of the planet. We're guardians of each other. Am I not my brother's keeper? Yes, you are. I am. My sister's keeper. We're commanded in Leviticus to love your neighbor as yourself. And you would never let someone in your family have to sleep out in the streets and deal with what's going on. And we're all family, and we need to commit to acting that way.
So God has given us stewardship. It's not ours. God gives us stewardship to care for and to tend to and to enhance or do as we can. But it's not ours to do with whatever we want. That's not the way we were given the world. And so we do have to be attentive to all that.
All right, panel, we have one more topic. We've got a minute left. Are you a fair goer? The Kentucky State Fair ends this weekend. Are you a thrill ride seeker or a fair food eater? Quickly, each of you.
Both.
Anybody else?
Yeah, I probably won't be making it this year, unfortunately, but I'm both. I don't like the lines sometimes for the rides, but I like the feel of zero gravity. I like that feeling.
I don't do the rides anymore. I've always hated, I am not a thrill seeker.
Jason, 30 seconds left.
I will say that I could have fervently and honestly said both without any detriment to my health or well-being up until recently. So now I will say both, but in moderation for my own well-being. Later that evening after visiting the fair the next day.
All right, that'll bring to a close our moral side of the news. Thank you, Gaylia Rooks, Jason Crosby, Kilen Gray, and Bill Hemmer. Join us again next week as the conversations continue. Thank you, panel.